Therefore, I hereby sentence you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. So ordered.
Judge Cynthia Okafor's gavel hit the bench like thunder. The sound echoed through the packed Atlanta courtroom. Every eye was on her, every breath held. "Hillary Okafor," she said, her voice steady as stone, "I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison." The man at the defense table didn't flinch. He just stared at his daughter, the judge who had just destroyed his life. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. The gallery erupted in whispers and gasps. But then something happened that no one expected. Judge Cynthia Okafor stood up. She removed her black robe, folded it carefully, and placed it on her chair. The courtroom fell silent, dead silent. She walked around her bench, down the steps, past the court clerk who was frozen in shock, past the lawyers who couldn't believe what they were seeing. She stopped right in front of her father. "Papa," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time all day. "I'm sorry." Hillary Okafor looked up at his daughter, the daughter he had raised, the daughter he had put through law school, the daughter who had just sent him to prison. Tears filled his eyes. "No, my child," he said softly. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." And then Judge Cynthia Okafor did something that would make headlines across the country. She hugged him, right there in the courtroom, in front of everyone. The judge hugged the criminal she had just sentenced. Security moved to separate them, but the lead marshal held up his hand. "Let them be," he said quietly. The silence stretched on and on. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody even breathed, because they were witnessing something sacred, something rare. Justice and mercy meeting in the middle of a broken world. But this story started long before that courtroom, long before that trial, long before that hug that stopped the world. This story started with a little girl who believed her father was Superman. She was about to learn the hardest lesson of her life. She just didn't know it yet. 32 years earlier, 8-year-old Cynthia Okafor sat on her father's shoulders in downtown Atlanta. They were watching the 4th of July parade, red, white, and blue everywhere. Marching bands playing, families laughing. "See that building, my little queen?" Hillary pointed to the towering courthouse ahead. "That's where justice lives." Cynthia squinted at the tall columns, the American flag flying high above. "What's justice, Papa?" Hillary lifted her down and knelt to her level. His dark eyes were serious but kind. "Justice is making sure good people are protected and bad people face consequences for their choices. Like when Tommy Morrison gets detention for pulling my hair?" Hillary laughed. His whole face lit up. "Exactly like that." They walked closer to the courthouse. Cynthia held her father's hand tight. Even at 8, she could feel the importance of this place, the weight of it. "Papa, are you a good person?" Hillary stopped walking. He looked down at his daughter, his only child, his greatest joy. "I try to be, Cynthia. Every single day, I try to be." "Then you never have to worry about that building." "No, my queen, I never have to worry." But Hillary Okafor was already worrying, already making deals he shouldn't make, already taking money he shouldn't take, already building an empire on lies. He just didn't know his daughter was watching, learning, remembering everything. Cynthia grew up in their Buckhead mansion believing her father was the most honest man in Georgia. Hillary owned 3 construction companies. He donated to children's hospitals. He sponsored scholarships for poor kids. Every Sunday, Hillary took Cynthia to New Birth Baptist Church. They sat in the 3rd row. Hillary sang hymns in his deep voice. He dropped $100 bills in the collection plate. "Always do what's right, Cynthia," he would say on the drive home, "even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Cynthia believed him. Why wouldn't she? He was her hero.
When she was 12, Hillary took her to court for the first time, a real court case. They sat in the gallery and watched a judge decide a property dispute. "See how she listens to both sides?" Hillary whispered. "How she weighs the evidence? That's what fairness looks like." The judge was an elderly black woman. Her nameplate read Judge Patricia Williams. She wore her authority like armor, calm, confident, unshakable. Cynthia was mesmerized. "Papa, I want to be like her." "A judge?" "Yes, I want to sit up there and make sure justice happens." Hillary squeezed her hand. "Then that's what you'll be, my queen, whatever you want to be." That night, Cynthia wrote in her diary, "I'm going to be a judge. I'm going to protect good people like Papa and stop bad people who hurt others." She had no idea that one day she'd have to decide which category her father belonged to. Cynthia studied harder than anyone in her class. She graduated high school as valedictorian, got a full scholarship to Emory University, then another scholarship to Emory Law School. Every step of the way, Hillary was there, cheering at graduation, paying for law school prep courses, buying her first business suits. "My daughter, the future judge," he would tell everyone who'd listen. The pride in his voice was real. The love was real. Everything else, that was about to become a question.
The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, and Tuesdays were about to become Cynthia's least favorite day of the week. Judge Cynthia Okafor, now 35 and 2 years on the federal bench, was reviewing case files in her chambers. Outside her window, Atlanta hummed with its usual energy. Traffic on Peachtree, construction cranes against the sky, life moving forward like it always did. Her clerk, Maria Santos, knocked softly. "Judge Okafor, there's a federal prosecutor here to see you. Says it's urgent." Cynthia looked up from her files. Urgent visits weren't normal, especially not without appointments. "Send them in." The woman who entered was tall and sharp-eyed. She carried herself like someone who'd never lost a case. Her name was Zara Asante. Cynthia recognized her from other courtrooms. "Judge Okafor, thank you for seeing me." "Of course. What's so urgent?" Zara closed the door behind her, sat down without being invited. That alone told Cynthia something big was coming. "There's going to be an investigation announced tomorrow morning into construction contract fraud, city contracts, state contracts, going back 15 years. Cynthia's pen stopped moving. She set it down carefully. "I see. And this concerns my court, how?" Zara opened her briefcase, pulled out a thick folder. "Because one of the companies under investigation is Okafor Construction, and 2 others are Okafor Development and Okafor Holdings." The room went cold. Cynthia felt her heartbeat in her ears. That's my father's company." "Companies, plural, and yes." Cynthia stood up, walked to her window, stared out at the city her father had helped build. "What exactly are you alleging?" "I'm not alleging anything yet. The FBI is investigating. But Judge Okafor, if charges are filed, there's going to be a conflict of interest issue." Cynthia turned around. "I'll recuse myself from any case involving my father." "It might not be that simple." Zara opened her briefcase, spread documents across Cynthia's desk. "The preliminary investigation shows a network. Your father's companies, city council members, the mayor's office, state legislators, judges." Cynthia's blood turned to ice. "Judges?" "2 sitting judges took campaign contributions from your father, large contributions, right before major city contracts were awarded to his companies." Cynthia sat down hard. "Which judges?" Zara pointed to names on a list. Cynthia recognized both. She'd had dinner at one's house just last month. "Judge Okafor, I need to ask you directly. Have you ever received money from your father, political contributions, personal gifts, anything that could be seen as influencing your decisions?"
He paid for law school, helped with my house down payment, normal father things. After you became a judge? Cynthia thought carefully. Her father had offered. She'd always said no. No, nothing after I took the bench. Zara nodded, made a note. That's good. That means you're not under investigation. But? If we bring charges against your father, and if other judges are compromised, you might be the only federal judge in this district who can hear the case. The words hit Cynthia like a truck. You're saying I might have to try my own father? I'm saying it's possible. Cynthia stood up again, paced to her bookshelf, touched her law school diploma, the one her father had framed for her. I can't. I won't. There has to be another way. Judge Okafor, I understand this is difficult, but if the investigation uncovers what we think it will, your father might be looking at serious federal charges: conspiracy, fraud, racketeering. Racketeering? If he's been paying bribes for 15 years, using multiple companies as fronts, coordinating with government officials, yes, RICO charges are possible. Cynthia felt sick. RICO meant decades in prison. RICO meant her father dying behind bars. How long do I have? The investigation goes public tomorrow. If charges are filed, probably 6 months, maybe less. After Zara left, Cynthia sat alone in her chambers. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across her desk. She picked up her phone 3 times to call her father, put it down 3 times. What would she say? Papa, are you a criminal? Papa, did you lie to me my whole life? Papa, am I going to have to send you to prison? Instead, she drove home to her condo in Virginia Highlands, poured a glass of wine, and sat on her balcony and watched the sun set over the city. Somewhere out there, her father was probably having dinner, maybe watching TV, living his life like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Everything. That night, for the first time since she was 8 years old, Cynthia Okafor cried herself to sleep.
The phone rang at 5:47 a.m., and Cynthia knew her world was about to explode. She grabbed it on the first ring. Her father's voice was tight with panic. "Cynthia? Baby girl? There are FBI agents at my door." Cynthia sat up in bed. Through her window, Atlanta was still dark, the city sleeping, unaware that everything was about to change. "Papa, don't say anything. Don't answer any questions. Call Robert immediately." Robert Jenkins was the best criminal defense attorney in Georgia. He'd been Hillary's friend for 20 years. Never thought he'd need to represent him. "Cynthia, I don't understand. They have warrants. They're taking my computers, my files, everything." "Just call Robert. Don't talk to anyone else." The line went dead. Cynthia threw on clothes and drove to her father's mansion. News vans were already there, neighbors standing in their robes watching the spectacle. FBI agents in windbreakers carried boxes out of her childhood home, the house where she'd learned to ride a bike, where she'd studied for the LSATs, where she'd celebrated her appointment to the federal bench. She couldn't get close. A police officer held up his hand. "Ma'am, this is an active crime scene." "That's my father's house." The officer looked at her with sympathy. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You'll have to wait across the street." So Cynthia stood behind the yellow tape and watched them dismantle her father's life, box by box, file by file. 25 years of memories reduced to evidence. Her phone buzzed constantly, text after text. "Cynthia, is it true?" from her law school roommate. "Call me immediately," from the chief judge. "I'm praying for your family," from her pastor. But the one that stopped her cold was from her father. "My queen, I'm sorry you had to see this. I love you. Always remember that I love you." It sounded like goodbye. By noon, the story was everywhere. Every news channel, every website, every radio station. Federal corruption probe rocks Atlanta. Construction king under investigation. Okafor empire crumbles.
Cynthia drove to the federal courthouse. Reporters swarmed her car. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust toward her window. "Judge Okafor, did you know about your father's crimes? Will you recuse yourself from any prosecution? How long has this corruption been going on?" She kept her head down, pushed through the crowd, made it to the security checkpoint. Inside, the courthouse felt different. Colleagues avoided eye contact. Whispered conversations stopped when she walked by. Chief Judge Harold Morrison was waiting in her chambers. He was a good man, fair, kind, but today he looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Cynthia, sit down." She sat across from him, the same chair where Zara had delivered the warning just yesterday. "The investigation is bigger than we thought. The FBI has evidence going back to 2008, maybe earlier." "What kind of evidence?" "Wire transfers, recorded conversations, documents your father kept." Cynthia's stomach dropped. "What kind of conversations?" "Phone calls with city council members, meeting recordings. Your father was thorough in documenting his business." "You mean his crimes?" Chief Judge Morrison winced. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet, but Cynthia, there's something else." "What?" "The Department of Justice is requesting that you oversee any prosecution. They want a clean judge, someone with no ties to the corruption network." "I have the biggest tie of all. He's my father." "But you have no financial connections, no political debts. You're clean." "I'm clean? My entire life was paid for by dirty money. My education, my opportunities, everything." "You didn't know that. Does it matter?" Chief Judge Morrison leaned forward. "Cynthia, listen to me. If we recuse you, this case might never get a fair trial. Half the judges in this district took money from your father. The other half have conflicts with the other defendants." "So I'm supposed to try my own father?" "You're supposed to uphold justice. That's what you swore to do." "And what about family? What about loyalty? What about the people your father defrauded? The taxpayers who got overcharged, the honest contractors who lost bids to corruption?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Cynthia thought about 8-year-old her standing outside this very courthouse, her father's voice. "Justice is making sure good people are protected and bad people face consequences." Had he known even then? Had he been teaching her the lesson that would destroy him? "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow morning. The Justice Department wants an answer." That evening, Cynthia sat in her father's favorite restaurant, Pascal's in Castleberry Hill, the place where he'd taken her after every major accomplishment, graduation, law school acceptance, her first job. The waitress recognized her. "Hon, I'm so sorry about your daddy. He's good people." "Thank you." But was he? Was he good people? Or had Cynthia been living a lie her entire life? She ordered his favorite, fried chicken and mac and cheese, ate it slowly, tasted every bite, because she knew it might be the last time she could sit here without thinking about crimes and victims and justice. Her phone rang. Her father. "Baby Burl, can you come see me?" "Where are you?" "Robert's office. We need to talk." The law offices of Jenkins and Associates felt like a funeral home, and Cynthia was about to bury her childhood. Her father sat in a leather chair, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. Robert Jenkins paced behind his desk like a caged lion. File boxes covered every surface. "Cynthia, thank you for coming," Robert said. "We need to discuss something important." She sat across from her father. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Papa, what's going on?" Hillary finally looked up. His face was tired, old, like he'd aged 20 years in 24 hours. "They have everything, my queen. Every deal, every payment, every conversation." "What conversations?" Robert opened a laptop, hit play on an audio file. Hillary's voice filled the room. The contract goes to my company. I don't care what the bid numbers say. Make it happen. Another voice. Hillary, this is risky. If anyone finds out. Hillary again. Nobody's going to find out. I've got judges in my pocket, city council votes, the whole system. Cynthia felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Papa, tell me this isn't real. I can't. Robert stopped the recording. There are 17 hours of conversations like this, bank records showing $2 million in payments, contracts that should have cost the city $50 million, but somehow cost $75 million. $25 million, Cynthia whispered, in overcharges, plus the bribes, plus the money laundering through shell companies. Cynthia stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the Atlanta skyline, buildings her father had constructed with stolen money. How long? 15 years, Hillary said quietly. 15 years of lies. I was protecting you, providing for you. Cynthia spun around. Protecting me? Papa, I'm a federal judge. Do you have any idea what this does to me? To my career? To everything I've worked for? I know. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Robert cleared his throat. There's more. More? The Justice Department is offering a plea deal. Cynthia's heart stopped. What kind of deal? Full cooperation, testifying against the other defendants in exchange for what? 12 years instead of life. Cynthia felt the room spinning. Life? He could get life? RICO charges carry 25 to life. Your father orchestrated a 15-year criminal enterprise involving dozens of people and millions of dollars. Hillary reached for his daughter's hand. She pulled away. Cynthia, please, I need you to know I never meant for this to happen. What did you mean to happen? I meant to build something, to leave you something. You did leave me something, a legacy of corruption and lies. That's not fair. Fair? Cynthia's voice rose. You want to talk about fair? What about the honest contractors who lost work because you rigged the bidding? What about the taxpayers who got cheated? What about me having to sit in judgment of my own father? Wait, Robert interrupted. What do you mean, sit in judgment? Cynthia told them about the Justice Department's request, about being the only clean judge available. The room went quiet. Finally, Hillary spoke. You can't do that. Why not? Because I'm your father. And you're also a criminal. The words hung in the air like a slap. Hillary's eyes filled with tears. Cynthia, if you take this case, you'll destroy both of us. You already destroyed both of us, the day you took your first bribe. I was trying to build something for our family. Our family? Where was our family when you were in meetings planning crimes? Where was our family when you taught me about justice while you were buying judges? I never bought you. No, but you raised me on stolen money. Robert stepped between them. Everyone needs to calm down. Emotions are high, but we need to focus on the legal issues. The legal issue is simple. Did he do it or not? He did it, Robert said quietly. Then he should face the consequences, even if you're the one imposing them. Cynthia looked at her father, the man who taught her to ride a bike, who walked her to school every day until she was 12, who cried when she graduated law school, who told her she could be anything she wanted to be, especially if I'm the one imposing them. Hillary stood up slowly. If you take this case, I'll never forgive you. If I don't take this case, I'll never forgive myself. Father and daughter stared at each other across 27 years of love and 15 years of lies. You have to choose, Cynthia, justice or family. You already made that choice, Papa. You chose money over family the day you took your first bribe. Cynthia walked toward the door. Where are you going? To tell the chief judge I'll take the case. Behind her, she heard her father collapse into his chair, heard him crying for the first time since her mother died, but she didn't turn around, because justice doesn't turn around. Justice moves forward, even when it breaks your heart. Especially when it breaks your heart. The courtroom was packed like a prize fight, and Cynthia was about to enter the ring against her own blood. 3 months had passed since her father's arrest. 3 months of preparation. 3 months of sleepless nights. 3 months of not speaking to the man who raised her. Now, on a cold February morning, United States versus Okafor was about to begin. Cynthia sat at the bench, looking down at the courtroom she'd presided over for 2 years. But today was different. Today felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Her father sat at the defense table with Robert Jenkins. He wore a navy blue suit, the same suit he'd worn to her graduation from law school. He looked older, grayer, but his back was straight, his chin up. He still looked like her father. The prosecution table was led by Zara Asante. She had 17 banker's boxes of evidence, recordings, financial records, witness statements. "All rise," the clerk announced. "The Honorable Judge Cynthia Okafor presiding." The gallery stood, reporters, citizens, city officials who weren't under investigation, FBI agents, her father's friends who still believed in him. Cynthia's hands shook as she arranged her papers. "Be seated. We are here today for the trial of United States versus Hillary Okafor. Charges include conspiracy, fraud, racketeering, and money laundering." Her voice was steady, professional. It didn't betray the war happening inside her chest. "Miss Asante, your opening statement." Zara stood, straightened her jacket, looked directly at the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about betrayal, the betrayal of public trust. For 15 years, the defendant systematically corrupted Atlanta's construction industry." She clicked a remote. A projection screen showed a web of connections, companies, officials, money flows. Hillary Okafor didn't just take bribes, he built a machine designed to steal taxpayer money. $25 million in fraudulent contracts, $2 million in direct bribes, dozens of co-conspirators. Cynthia watched the jury, 12 men and women listening to the destruction of her father's reputation. "The defense will tell you that Mr. Okafor is a pillar of the community, a successful businessman, a devoted father." Zara paused, looked directly at Cynthia. "But community pillars don't record themselves bragging about buying judges. Devoted fathers don't build their children's futures on stolen money." Cynthia's face stayed neutral, but inside she was dying. "By the end of this trial, you'll see that Hillary Okafor is guilty of every charge against him, and justice demands that you hold him accountable." Zara sat down. The courtroom was silent. "Mr. Jenkins, your opening statement." Robert stood slowly. He'd known Hillary for 20 years, had barbecues at his house, bounced Cynthia on his knee when she was little. "Thank you, Your Honor." He looked at the jury with tired eyes. "Hillary Okafor is guilty." Gasps from the gallery. Cynthia blinked in surprise. Even Zara looked confused. "I'm not here to lie to you. The evidence is clear. My client took bribes, rigged contracts, broke the law." Robert paused, let that sink in. "But I want you to understand why. Hillary Okafor grew up poor in rural Georgia. His father sharecropped land that white families owned. His mother cleaned houses for families that wouldn't let her children play with theirs. He came to Atlanta with nothing, built a business with his hands, employed hundreds of people, donated millions to charity." Robert's voice grew stronger. "Does that excuse his crimes? No, but it explains them. When you grow up with nothing, you do whatever it takes to make sure your children have everything." He pointed to Cynthia. "That woman sitting in judgment today, she's his daughter, and she's here because Hillary Okafor sacrificed everything to give her opportunities he never had. The prosecution wants you to see a criminal. I want you to see a father, a man who made terrible choices for reasons you might understand." Robert sat down. The first witness was FBI agent Marcus Thompson. He'd led the investigation, spent 2 years following money trails and recording conversations. Agent Thompson, Zara began, tell the jury what you discovered about the defendant's business practices. We identified a pattern of corruption spanning 15 years. Mr. Okafor would learn about upcoming city contracts through inside sources. Then he'd submit bids higher than his competitors, but pay bribes to ensure his companies won. How much higher were his bids? On average, 30% above market rate. And the taxpayers paid this inflated amount. Yes, ma'am. How much did taxpayers lose due to Mr. Okafor's scheme? $25 million in documented overcharges. A murmur went through the courtroom. $25 million was real money. Schools that could have been built, roads that could have been repaired, services that could have been provided. Agent Thompson, did you record conversations between Mr. Okafor and city officials? We did. How many hours of recordings? 17 hours. Can you play an example for the jury? Agent Thompson nodded. The audio system crackled to life. Hillary's voice filled the courtroom. Look, I don't care what the other bids are. I'm paying you to make sure I win. That's what corruption means. I pay, you deliver. Everyone's happy. An unknown voice. What if someone asks questions? Hillary. Who's going to ask questions? I've got judges in my pocket, city council members. The whole system is ours. The recording stopped. The silence was deafening. Cynthia watched her father. His head was down, his shoulders shaking slightly. Agent Thompson, in that recording, what did Mr. Okafor mean when he said he had judges in his pocket? He was referring to campaign contributions to judges who would oversee any legal challenges to city contracts. Did any of those judges rule in his favor? All of them. Zara smiled grimly. No further questions. Robert stood for cross-examination. Agent Thompson, you've been investigating my client for 2 years. Yes, sir. In all that time, did you find any evidence that Judge Cynthia Okafor was involved in her father's crimes? No, sir. Any evidence she knew about his illegal activities? No, sir. Any evidence she received money or benefits that could be considered bribes? No, sir. So, despite being raised by Mr. Okafor, despite him paying for her education, Judge Okafor appears to be completely clean. That's correct. Robert nodded. Which suggests that whatever else my client did wrong, he raised a daughter with integrity. Objection, Zara called out. Relevance? Cynthia sustained the objection, but the point was made. The trial continued for 6 days, witness after witness, recording after recording, document after document. Each piece of evidence was like a nail in her father's coffin, and Cynthia had to sit there, watch it happen, pretend it didn't tear her heart out. On the final day, Hillary took the stand in his own defense. Robert led him through his life story, the poverty, the struggle, the determination to give his daughter a better life. Mr. Okafor, did you take bribes? Yes. Did you rig city contracts? Yes. Did you commit the crimes you're charged with? Yes. Why? Hillary looked directly at Cynthia the first time since the trial began. Because I wanted my daughter to have everything I never had. I wanted her to go to the best schools, live in the best neighborhoods, have opportunities that were denied to me. Do you regret your actions? I regret hurting the taxpayers of Atlanta. I regret betraying the public trust. But I don't regret giving my daughter the education that put her on that bench. Zara's cross-examination was brutal. Mr. Okafor, you say you committed crimes to help your daughter. Yes. But your daughter became successful through her own intelligence and hard work, didn't she? She's brilliant. She could have succeeded without your stolen money, couldn't she? I don't know. You don't know? You have so little faith in your own daughter that you think she needed stolen money to succeed. Hillary's face crumpled. I just wanted to make sure. Make sure? Or did you just want to excuse your greed? I wasn't greedy. Zara held up a bank statement. You have $47 million in various accounts. Your daughter's law school cost $200,000. Her house cost $400,000. $600,000 total. That leaves $46 million for yourself. I was building a legacy. A criminal legacy? Objection, Robert called. Sustained. But again, the point was made. When testimony ended, Cynthia knew the verdict was inevitable. The evidence was overwhelming. Her father was guilty of every charge. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. Have you reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of conspiracy, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of fraud, how do you find? Guilty.
2 weeks later, Cynthia stood in her chambers at dawn. Today, she would sentence the man who taught her to believe in justice. The irony was almost unbearable. She'd barely slept in 14 days, barely eaten. Legal precedent demanded 15 to 20 years for crimes this extensive. The prosecution recommended the maximum. The defense begged for mercy. Her phone had been ringing constantly. Reporters wanting quotes, legal experts wanting comments, friends wanting to know if she was okay. She wasn't okay. She might never be okay again. At 9 a.m. sharp, she entered the courtroom. The gallery was packed again. This time, it felt like a funeral instead of a prize fight. Her father sat at the defense table. He'd lost weight during the trial. His suit hung loose on his shoulders, but he sat straight, dignified. The court is now in session. We're here for sentencing in United States versus Hillary Okafor. Cynthia's voice was steady, professional. It gave no hint of the storm inside her heart. Before I impose sentence, I'll hear from the victims. 3 people came forward. A school principal whose building renovation was delayed because of overcharges. A taxpayer who'd calculated how much extra her family paid because of corruption. A contractor who'd lost legitimate bids to Hillary's rigged system. Each spoke of betrayal, of trust broken, of a system corrupted by greed. Then Zara Asante stood. Your Honor, the defendant's crimes span 15 years, 25 million in taxpayer money stolen, a democratic system corrupted. Justice demands accountability. The prosecution recommends 20 years in federal prison. She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Mr. Jenkins, does the defendant wish to speak? Robert nodded, helped Hillary stand. Hillary walked to the podium. His hands shook slightly as he gripped the sides. Your Honor, he paused, looked directly at his daughter. Cynthia, I want to say I'm sorry. His voice broke on her name. I'm sorry to the taxpayers of Atlanta. I'm sorry to the honest contractors I cheated. I'm sorry to the system I corrupted. He paused again, gathered himself. But mostly, I'm sorry to you, my daughter, my greatest accomplishment. I'm sorry for putting you in this position. I'm sorry for forcing you to choose between justice and family. Tears ran down his face. You were right to take this case. You were right to prosecute me. You were right to find me guilty, because that's who you are. That's who I raised you to be. A person who does what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the reporters had stopped taking notes. I know you have to sentence me. I know you have to do your job. And I want you to know, I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you, and I always will be. He walked back to his seat, sat down heavily. Cynthia stared at her notes, at the sentencing guidelines, at the law that demanded justice regardless of family ties. She stood up. Hillary Okafor, you have been found guilty of conspiracy, fraud, racketeering, and money laundering. These crimes represent a 15-year betrayal of public trust. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Your actions cost taxpayers $25 million.
You corrupted the democratic process. You turned public service into private profit. She paused, looked at her father. The law requires me to impose sentence based on the severity of your crimes and the need for deterrence. Personal relationships cannot factor into this decision. But they do factor in, because the man sitting before me is not just a defendant, he's my father, the man who raised me, who taught me right from wrong, who put me through school. Gasps from the gallery. This wasn't standard sentencing language. And that makes your crimes even worse, because you knew better, you taught me better. Every lesson about honesty and integrity that you gave me, you were violating yourself. Hillary's head hung down. You say you did this for me, to give me opportunities, but you could have given me opportunities honestly. You could have built a legitimate business. You could have been the man you taught me to be. Instead, you chose crime, you chose corruption, you chose your own desires above the public good. Cynthia picked up her gavel. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The gavel hit. The sound echoed through the packed courtroom. 15 years. Her father would be 73 when he got out, if he got out. But something was happening, something unexpected. Cynthia wasn't finished. She stood up, removed her black robe, folded it carefully, placed it on her chair. The courtroom fell silent, dead silent. She walked around her bench, down the steps, past the court clerk who was frozen in shock, past the lawyers who couldn't believe what they were seeing. She stopped right in front of her father.
The silence stretched like eternity. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. The entire courtroom held its breath as Judge Cynthia Okafor stood face to face with the father she had just sentenced to 15 years in prison. "Papa," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time all day. "I'm sorry." Hillary looked up at his daughter, the daughter he had raised, the daughter he had put through law school, the daughter who had just sent him to prison. Tears filled his eyes. "No, my child," he said softly. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." And then Judge Cynthia Okafor did something that would make headlines across the country. She hugged him. Right there in the courtroom, in front of everyone, the judge hugged the criminal she had just sentenced. Security moved to separate them, but the lead marshal held up his hand. "Let them be," he said quietly. The hug lasted 30 seconds, maybe more. Father and daughter holding each other across the wreckage of their family. "I still love you, Papa," Cynthia whispered. "I love you too, my queen. I always have. I always will." When they finally separated, both were crying openly. Cynthia stepped back, looked at her father one last time. "You taught me to do what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. This was the hardest thing I've ever done." Hillary nodded. "And you did it perfectly. You are everything I hoped you would become, everything I dreamed of when you were 8 years old, standing outside this courthouse." Cynthia turned to the packed gallery, reporters with cameras, citizens watching justice happen in real time, FBI agents who'd spent 2 years building this case. "My father is a criminal," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the courtroom. "He committed serious crimes over many years. He betrayed the public trust. He corrupted our system." She paused, gathered herself. "But he's also the man who taught me about justice, who showed me what integrity means, who raised me to believe that doing right matters more than doing what's easy. I prosecuted him because that's what justice demanded. I sentenced him because that's what the law required. I hugged him because that's what love demanded." Another pause. The courtroom remained silent as a tomb. Justice isn't the absence of mercy. Justice is mercy and accountability working together.
My father will serve his sentence, he will pay his debt to society, and when he gets out, if he gets out, he will still be my father. Because family isn't about perfection. Family is about love surviving imperfection. She looked back at Hillary. You were wrong to commit those crimes, Papa, but you were right about one thing. You taught me to be the person standing here today, a person who chooses justice over convenience, truth over comfort, right over easy. And if that's your legacy, if that's what you built with your life, then maybe some good can come from all this pain. Cynthia walked back to the bench, put her robe back on, sat down. This court is adjourned. The gavel hit one final time. Then chaos erupted. Reporters shouting questions, camera flashes exploding, people talking all at once. But Cynthia didn't hear any of it. She was watching her father being led away in handcuffs, watching him turn back one last time to look at her. He mouthed the words, "Thank you." She mouthed back, "I love you." And then he was gone. 3 hours later, Cynthia sat in her chambers. The courthouse was quiet. The reporters were gone. The spectacle was over. Her clerk knocked softly. "Judge Okafor, there's someone here to see you." "I'm not seeing anyone today, Maria. It's Chief Judge Morrison. He says it's important." Chief Judge Morrison entered with a folder under his arm. His face was unreadable. That was quite a performance out there. It wasn't a performance. I know. That's what made it so powerful. He sat down across from her desk. The Justice Department is calling it the most compelling sentencing they've ever witnessed. You're going to be on every news show in America. I don't want to be on any news shows. Too late for that. He opened his folder, pulled out a document. There's something else. We received this an hour ago. Cynthia looked at the letterhead, Office of the Attorney General. They're offering you a promotion, United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. Congratulations. Cynthia stared at the letter. They want me to run the office that just prosecuted my father? They want someone clean, someone who's proven they can't be bought or influenced, someone who will choose justice over everything else. Someone who will send their own father to prison? Someone who will uphold their oath no matter what it costs them personally. Cynthia set the letter down. I need to think about it. Of course, but Cynthia, yes?
What you did today, that's what justice looks like. Painful, complicated, but absolutely necessary. After he left, Cynthia sat alone in her chambers as the sun set over Atlanta. The same view she'd had for 2 years, the same city her father had helped build with stolen money. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Judge Okafor, my name is Marcus Williams. My construction company lost 12 bids to your father's rigged system. I went bankrupt, lost my house, my family struggled for years. Today I watched you sentence him, and then I watched you hug him. I want you to know that seeing you choose both justice and mercy, it helps me believe in the system again. Thank you. Then another text. This is Sarah Chen. I'm a young lawyer in Atlanta. What you did today reminded me why I wanted to practice law. Thank you for showing us what integrity looks like. And another. Judge, I'm a reporter who covered your father's crimes. I was ready to write about corruption destroying another family. Instead, I got to write about love surviving the worst circumstances. Your father raised a remarkable daughter. They kept coming. Dozens of messages, hundreds, people she'd never met, thanking her for showing them what justice with mercy looked like. Cynthia walked to her window, looked out at the city lights of Atlanta. Somewhere out there, her father was beginning a 15-year sentence. Somewhere out there, taxpayers were going to sleep knowing their system still worked.
Somewhere out there, a little girl was maybe watching the news and learning that doing right mattered more than doing what was easy. She picked up the promotion letter from the Attorney General's office. Tomorrow she'd make another difficult decision, another choice between easy and right. But tonight, she just stood at her window and remembered an 8-year-old girl holding her father's hand outside a courthouse, learning about justice from a man who would one day force her to choose justice over him. He'd taught her well, better than he knew, and in the end, that might be the only justice that really mattered. The judge had sentenced her father. Then she'd made the courtroom go silent. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full of love, full of mercy, full of the complicated truth that justice isn't about choosing between right and wrong. It's about choosing right even when it breaks your heart, especially when it breaks your heart. Outside her window, Atlanta hummed with life. Construction cranes against the sky, traffic moving on honest roads built by honest contractors, a city healing from corruption, a city where justice and mercy could coexist in the same broken, beautiful heart, where a daughter could sentence her father and still love him, where doing right was more important than doing easy, and where 8-year-old dreams of justice could survive even the worst betrayals. Because in the end, that's what folktales teach us. Not that good people always win, not that families never break, not that justice comes without cost, but that love can survive anything, that integrity matters more than comfort, that the right choice is still the right choice, even when it destroys everything you thought you knew about your life. Judge Cynthia Okafor had learned the hardest lesson anyone can learn, that sometimes loving someone means holding them accountable for their choices, even when that someone is the person who taught you how to love in the first place. If Hillary Okafor had chosen honesty over greed 15 years ago, his daughter would never have faced the hardest decision of her life. But he didn't choose honesty. And fate rewarded every second of Cynthia's courage with something more valuable than comfort, the knowledge that she could look at herself in the mirror every morning for the rest of her life. If you want to see who fate visits next, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because in these stories, the corrupt always fall, and the righteous, they always rise, even when rising breaks their hearts.